Hi, it's Deb again, and good for you. The end is in sight. You are almost done with this summer of biology. I have to admit, as I read everything, you have obviously immersed yourself in biology this summer, so good for you. It'll pay off. The grades are better than I have ever seen, so pat yourself on the back. All right, what you have left to do, I'm going to kind of try to cover everything because people are working ahead now that they see the end. For Module 6, you've got 3 chapters. It's human genetics or genetics, which is really pretty interesting. Y'all probably remember Punnett squares and all that business, and so it kind of ties into that. Let's talk first about the Human Genetics Lab. Okay, to save time, I opened up that link, just scrolling down in Module 6. And you'll see that there's quite a few things to open. There's lab instructions in either Word or rich text format. There's a table and questions to post separately in both forms. So let's see what you're going to look at. First, here are the instructions. And I was scrolling down. They'll open up to the beginning, but it goes through each of the traits and talks about how you determine what you are, dominant or recessive. And for example, let's look at earlobes. Let's see. Attached earlobes is the bottom picture, is the bottom picture there. That means that it's attached to your head there at the bottom instead of a free hanging lobe, and that's recessive. So if you have that attached, you'll see up here that you can only have your genotype be 2 small e's, because that's all you can have is 2 recessive genes, one from mom, one from dad, and that's the only way you can have that recessive trait. If you're the dominant trait and you have a tab, kind of a lobe hanging down here on picture A, that's your phenotype, what it looks like, what you look like is your phenotype, and your genotype are the actual genes that you got from mom and dad, and if they're recessive or dominant. And so if you have this hanging lobe, it's dominant. Since dominant is this kind of magical thing that masks if you have a recessive trait in there, it can be 2 things. You can either have 2 capital E's, you could have gotten 2 dominant traits one from each of your parents, or you could actually get a dominant trait for your mom, for example, and then the recessive from your dad. And that would be the big E and the little e right here. That would show up as your genotype as big E and little e, but your phenotype, once again, is the same. It's a dominant trait. So when you fill out your worksheet, let's say, let's go to tongue rolling for another example. Let's say I can roll my tongue. So you write your phenotype, whatever it is, whatever your hairline is, it's not the actual genes, it's what you look like. And since I can roll my tongue and I look at my sheet and I see that tongue rolling is dominant, even though there are some questions about it, you'll see in the questions at the end, my genotype, what I get from my mom and dad, one from each, can either be this or this. So I got 2 possibilities there. And so fill it out for whatever your traits are. Let's say I have no freckles. That's not true, but I want to have a recessive trait here. So that's the recessive trait. So I put an X over here. That means since I know my phenotype is a recessive trait, my only possible genotype is the recessive one. 2 little f's. That's the only possibility I can have. All right, so then you're going to go down and you're going to survey some people, about 10 people, and figure out what their traits are for each of those things. But before you do it, predict what 3 traits are you going to be the most common. You might be surprised, actually. Turns out sometimes not the dominant trait isn't the most common. And so you interview 5 to 10 people, fill it out, were you correct, and then write about tongue rolling has become controversial. Research why, and how could you demonstrate that it's controversial. So this last group of questions, you're going to, after you fill them out, you're going to copy them and paste them into the text box when you post your final